Ethan Behrman, Left Coast News.
Thanks for joining me here on Dispatch 41. Well, look, Friday we had the global climate strike led by a young Swedish girl who took a boat across the Pacific with no emissions. It was rather interesting. I'm going to let you listen to her pronounce her own name here.
My name is Greta Thunberg.
And there was a giant steak fry in Iowa yesterday. The Democratic primaries are coming up here in roughly 130 days, depending on when you're listening to this. And so the pressure is on, the heat is on for the top candidates. So they joined a giant steak fry in Iowa. And I'm going to give you the latest Iowa polls here in just a second, because it all ties together with the climate crisis and the election that is coming up. Now, here's the deal. The latest Iowa poll came out from the Des Moines Register. It was done in conjunction with CNN. And interestingly, Senator Elizabeth Warren now has a 2-point lead. 22% of the 602 likely Democratic caucus goers who responded to this poll, 22% said Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts. Former Vice President Joe Biden, who's been the leader the whole way through, is essentially in a statistical tie because the margin of error is 4%. He's in second at 20%. Bernie Sanders has fallen out. I really believe it's time for him to hang it up. I just do. I know a lot of Bernie supporters get mad at me. His time was 2016. You have Elizabeth Warren now. You have other progressive candidates who are picking up where he led in 2016. Remember, he got like 50% of the vote in Iowa in the 2016 primary. He's at 11% right now. He really ought to get behind one of the other candidates. And it's just not his year. His year was 2016. So here's who else we have. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, 9%. Senator Kamala Harris of California, 6%. Senators Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, 3%. At 2% are Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, former U.S. Representative Beto O'Rourke of Texas, Tom Steyer, how the hell does he have 2%? I honestly don't understand that, because we had Bill de Blasio drop out this week, who should have never been in it. Tom Steyer's another one. Why is he in this? He's a billionaire. Put your money behind candidates that support the causes that you have. Entrepreneur Andrew Yang, he's an interesting twist in this whole race to me. He's also at 2%. Everybody else is at 1% or less. I'm getting to the point, if you're at 1% or less, you probably need to be considering your future. Senator Cory Booker, who's at 3% in this latest poll, sent me a text message yesterday on September 21st saying, Cory Booker here, we're at a crossroads, meet our $1.7 million goal or face serious challenges keeping my voice in this race. In other words, yeah, the lower rating candidates are going to run into serious financial trouble. They're going to start dropping out here like Bill de Blasio did, mayor of New York, who really should have never been in the race in the first place. And here's interestingly enough, though, I follow Beto O'Rourke pretty closely. And I honestly question that a 2% poll reflects the support he really has on the ground. If you watched any of the videos of the steak fry yesterday, he had huge support. He has very strong supporters who are vocal, who are working hard for him. I think this is going to come down to, in my mind, it's right now, it's Senator Warren and Vice President Biden. And if people like Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris or Mayor Pete can't break into the double digits soon, they start becoming talk of who becomes the vice presidential candidate. That's just the way this stuff plays out. I'm suspicious of the 2%, though, for Beto, based on the amount of support I hear. And he's a leader, along with Vice President Joe Biden, on the topic of climate crisis with the climate strike that happened on Friday. I recently had a conversation. It was an excellent one with Michael Harrison. I call him the Professor Emeritus of the talk radio industry. He's publisher of Talkers Magazine. And he's also many other things. He has a weekly show on WONK-FM in Washington, D.C. He recently had me on after the CNN climate town hall to discuss climate change, the climate crisis, and what's happening in the race. I want you to take a listen to our conversation.
Continuing now with the Michael Harrison Wrap. The subject of climate change was big this past week, number 6 overall, much louder than usual due to the hurricane and Wednesday night's 7-hour CNN town meeting in which the leading Democratic presidential hopefuls were given lots of time to explain their policies on dealing with the issue. The 2020 race itself came in at number 5. Here to talk about it is regular Fox News Channel commentator, one of the platform's more progressive voices, Ethan Behrman in Los Angeles.
I think it's really important that we now use the term climate crisis. The confluence of events that is coming forth between the rising temperatures, the pollution, the destruction of the ecosystems are putting human life, which is already precarious on this little blue dot in the universe, in a much more precarious position. The Earth will survive. We are the ones who might not. And so I do find it to be a very serious topic. And yeah, I did catch some of the Democrats last night on CNN, and I believe that we saw some real differences.
Do you think that this has enough support in terms of the public? Because it depends on who you talk to. And in talk media, you can listen to entire bubbles where people would say that you're completely wrong and that this is a fake crisis. And of course, there are people who are, totally out of their minds over it. So do you think that this is big enough a topic, big enough a concern in terms of Americans at large, that the Democrats are smart to use it as one of the major planks of their platform?
I'm not sure if it's smart to use it as a major plank, and the reason why is because it's too esoteric, and too many of the voters are north of 40 years old, and that's about the age range where it really matters. If you're under 40, Frank Luntz has some great polling out there. Under 40, it's of great concern. Over 40, it depends on where you fall on the political spectrum, whether you really care about it or not. And so purely from an electability standpoint, it might be a decent idea that Tom Perez, head of the DNC, said, we're not going to make this a major focal point. However, from the big picture, it's a really big issue. And if you can get young people to turn out to vote, again, regardless of party, under 40-year-olds are concerned about the climate. But if the Democrats can actually get under 40-year-olds to turn out to vote, that swings the election. So it does become a big deal.
What's your gut feeling at this point about millennials? Do you think that millennials are less likely, even now, to turn out to vote as boomers? Or do you think that they're becoming more inclined to be politically active, at least to the point of going to the ballot box?
It's interesting. I really discussed this on the air before the midterm elections for the 2018 midterms. I had a number of Gen Z and millennial people on the show to talk about it, and there was a lot of talk of them showing up, and yet the data showed otherwise. They didn't. They simply didn't. It was the disenfranchisement, the disappointment with Donald Trump that made people, the older people, the Gen Xers and the boomers, actually show up to vote. The young people really didn't. So the trend continued just as it always has, which is young people are active at protests and talking about it, but not necessarily showing up to the polls. I hope that changes in 2020, but the evidence does not support that.
And just to reiterate, you personally, based on your studies, based on your observations, and just based on your own instincts, do believe that it's no longer even change, that it has entered the realm of crisis.
Yeah, and let me be very clear about that. It's crisis because not just carbon dioxide, parts per million that are absolutely unheard of in the last several million years now. It's actually because we are poisoning ourselves to death. In my book, Liars and Whores, I talked about that quite a bit, Michael, and I had a whole chapter on it. It matters that we're killing ourselves. It matters that the number of insects that have been counted since the 1970s in a pristine area of Germany, let alone in the Caribbean, where they've seen the same thing, have dropped by 70%. Insects outweigh us by a hundredfold here on this planet. They're disappearing because of the toxins we're dumping indiscriminately into the environment. We're going to kill ourselves before climate change kills us, and it's the poisons, but they tie together. So the resilience of the ecosystems is weakened by all of the other pollution that we're doing, and then the heat and the climate change itself can finish it off and tip it over the edge. It's a crisis.
So pragmatically, what can we do about it?
We begin by doing things like saying, hey, let's move toward organic practices and eating organic foods. Let's reduce the amount of plastic waste. We don't need plastic bags. Move back to recycled paper bags. There are so many minimal steps that we can take. Let's move to hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles. You don't have to immediately go to all battery vehicles. We can do geothermal. We can do all kinds of things to minimize the impact, lead the way, and show the world how it's done. Because, yeah, as Joe Biden said last night, we're only 15% of the world's pollution, but we can lead and we can demonstrate and we can pull everybody along with us. But it all begins locally. So, yes, you and I can have a major impact even when it feels small. Individual raindrops make up a pond. The pond doesn't form on its own.
What do you think about Elizabeth Warren's statement that, let's not focus on straws and plastic. Let's focus on the 70% that's being caused by, big corporations, the oil industry, and people of that nature. What do you think of that approach?
She's, I think, a little late to the game when it comes to the climate crisis. Joe Biden is the longest member of Congress who first introduced a climate bill in 1986. She only released her plan on September 3rd. Now, don't get me wrong. I have amazing respect for the brilliant Senator Warren. I find her amazing. This is not an area she has led on. I also was disappointed to hear her false dichotomy, that false choice that we can't focus on multiple things at once. We absolutely can, and we must. When there's a crisis, we can focus on the large hydrocarbon, oil, petrochemical industries, and we can reduce pollution at a local level in small steps that all work together to make change. We do have other people in this race who I think are thinking bigger picture about it. And honestly, out of last night, or not even honestly, bluntly, out of last night, I thought 2, maybe 3 people showed themselves to be leaders on the climate topic, and it was Joe Biden, it was Beto O'Rourke, and it was maybe Kamala Harris and actually Andrew Yang, so that makes it 4. But the rest, I just didn't think were as strong.
From Los Angeles, that's one of the Fox News Channel's more moderate talking heads and former KGO San Francisco radio host, Ethan Behrman.
So again, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for the time that you have spent listening. It means a lot to join me. Please, the one thing that you can do, like, share, subscribe, comment, send me your comments. That's really important to me. But share it with others. That's really important to grow the listener base, and that has cachet in the industry. If you want to hear more of me, see more of me, share this with others. That helps. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next Dispatch.